Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. Today, joining us on the show, we have the remarkable human being, Heather Croall, CEO of the Adelaide Fringe Festival. Heather is a visionary in the creative sector, bringing innovation and growth to everything she touches, and was recently named CEO of the Year for CEO magazine and ranked number 26 in the top 50 most influential people in South Australia for 2022. With over 800,000 ticket sales per year, the Adelaide Fringe Festival is the biggest arts festival in the Southern Hemisphere and the second largest fringe festival in the world. Heather is known for her adaptive and agile leadership methodologies that have helped implement innovative digital platforms and systems that drive change and growth. Under her leadership, every fringe festival that Heather has run has seen an increase in turnover, been met with high critical acclaim, delivered growth in ticket sales, and expanded audience demographics. In this episode, we dive into Heather's journey, starting from the UK and the positive influence her parents played in her life. She shares the story behind the documentary that she directed and produced about her father filming him in his last moments. Titled Ye Old Feyther, went on to win many awards. We also talk about the Adelaide Fringe Festival and all the things that happen behind the scenes and how she believes it has the potential to be the biggest fringe festival in the world. I absolutely love this chat with Heather and I know you're going to enjoy it too. So without further ado, here is my chat with Heather Croall. So welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. Today we have the amazing and wonderful Heather Croall on the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
Very excited. There is big things happening in South Australia with the Adelaide Fringe, and you obviously head up the Adelaide Fringe Festival. So kudos to all the amazing work that you're doing there. Before we jump in, I just want to rattle off a few things about Heather that I've sort of conjured up and some of the accolades that you've received recently. So obviously CEO of the Adelaide Fringe, second biggest fringe festival in the world. It has seen an increase in turnover, been met with critical acclaim and delivered increased ticket sales and expanded audience demographic ever since you've taken role of the piece. And then, but some recent accolades, CEO of the Year 2022 from the CEO magazine, Festival Management CEO of the Year in the CEO Monthly magazine, winner of the SA Tourism Awards in major festivals and events, winner of the Best Festival in Australia, named in the top 50 most influential people in South Australia. You have your own Wikipedia page, which I found is really cool. And I'll throw this in as not exactly an accolade, but you're a lover of all things roller skating as well, which is so not a bad little lineup there. Well done.
Yeah, it's been an amazing couple of years of I keep getting these emails saying you're nominated for this and you've won that. And yeah, it's been pleasantly surprising to be honest.
We are running the second biggest fringe festival in the world. So I think you're doing something right. Before we jump into all things Adelaide Fringe, and I'd love to understand who Heather is and the amazing human being who's sitting in front of me. And what do we need to know about your earliest context to understand how you ended up where you are today?
Well, when I graduated from university, I was a documentary maker. For many years, I was a documentary maker. And I mean, still to this day, I make documentaries. Yes. But as my early years of working in film and television, I made documentaries for ABC and SBS and BBC, Channel 4, things like that. And I used to travel the world a lot, going to festivals and conferences to try and find international collaborators to co-produce films with. And in those days, there was not that many Australian documentary makers travelling to places in the early 90s. I'd often be the only Australian filmmaker at big film festivals. And I thought, it's, these film festivals have got these amazing marketplaces. Cannes, documentary festival in Amsterdam called IDFA, big festivals across America, and they really had these amazing marketplaces. They were more a marketplace than they were actually a general public film festival.
Yeah, wow.
And so then I made a lot of connections with a lot of industry in those early days, and they're people that I continue to work with and stay connected with 30 years on. And when I was appointed to run the Australian Documentary Conference, which was in the early 2000s, I really wanted to build this marketplace there that was, I guess, really heavily influenced by what I'd seen in Europe and America and other places where they had strong marketplaces in festivals. And so I built this market called the Meat Market, and then we called it the MEET, Meat Market.
The Meat Market.
And it became an incredibly fruitful marketplace for co-productions to sign deals. And so that was, I guess, when I set that up, I thought I want to build the market that exists in an Australian film festival that I wish existed when I first started as a filmmaker, so that I didn't always have to fly to overseas. So that was something that I still think influences what I do to this very day, because, we can talk a bit more about it as we talk more, but I also have grown a very big marketplace behind the scenes at the Adelaide Fringe as well. So really understanding that industry networking and matchmaking and helping artists, whether they're filmmakers or performers, whatever genre, helping those creative people make deals and close touring deals and funding deals is like a really important driver for me, because it's just that acknowledgement that arts needs help in that business side. It's that the show biz. We often think about the show, but not so much the business.
100%.
And so that's my early days as a filmmaker. I got very heavily influenced by attending these film festivals and markets, and then I was always actually doing stuff for the Fringe as well. With alongside, I was working in different venues at the Fringe. I was a manager at the Star Club, which is like one of the wonderful venues in the 90s down at the Lion Arts Centre. We had Stomp, where Stomp was a sellout, lines down the street every night. We had big shows that went on to become television shows,
brilliant.
And fantastic, Doug Anthony All-Stars, and there's fantastic performers like that. And that was my, I guess, job that I did while I was studying, but also even later when I was a filmmaker, I still used to work at the Fringe. It was just a love that I had to always come back and work at Fringe. Brilliant. And so I've always been involved in Fringe for many years.
I'd love to jump in. We jump straight into becoming a filmmaker. Let's go back early days. So you and your family from the UK, born over in the UK, is that correct?
Yes. So my parents are from Glasgow, and we moved here when I was a few years old. Yeah,
okay, great. So what was the reason for them? Your parents got some work over here, or just starting a new life? Why did you guys come over to Australia?
Well, my father was an obstetrician gynecologist, and this was in the 10-pound POM days. And so doctors were needed. Australia needed doctors, and doctors were coming in from all over the world. Yeah, brilliant. And we moved to Griffith for just a very
it's over in New South Wales,
fleeting moment, not very long at all. And then that was where we were just stationed just to set up to have a look around. Mm-hmm. And then my dad, being a Glaswegian who basically wanted sunshine and blue skies, and so there were different organisations throughout the different health systems. They were sort of basically fly doctors all over Australia and say, where do you want to live? Yeah. And so my dad got flown to Tasmania and Mackay and Queensland, and he got taken all over the place. And then he got to Whyalla, and the only question he ever asked at every town that he went was, how often does the sun shine here? And in Whyalla, they were like, every day, because, it's in the desert, basically. I mean, it's where the desert meets the sea, but at least it is still a desert climate. Absolutely. And so he was like, great, we'll move here. So we moved to Whyalla, which was a steel town, BHP. And so we set up there, and my dad and my mum actually both loved Whyalla. Like they were the biggest Whyalla flag wavers. They thought it was the best.
Yeah.
And so my father really stayed there and, until he died.
Yep.
So, 40 years of delivering babies, 3 generations. By the time he retired, he was delivering people who he had delivered the mother who was giving birth and the grandmother.
Yeah.
So that was pretty funny. And so he
That's amazing.
delivered 3 generations of babies, and everyone in the town knew him. And he,
he's no doubt. I got my wife's some of my wife's family's from Whyalla, and there's probably no doubt he's delivered some of my wife's family over there, which is
that's probably true. And he was also he was quite a big environmentalist, and when we first got there, he was like, "Where's all the trees? There's not enough trees." So one thing that when I was a child before school, almost every day, we used to go out and either water trees that he'd planted, or we were collecting seeds from gum nuts. We used to drive around and get gum nuts off the trees, and then plant them and turn them into little seedlings. And then all over Whyalla now, when you go to Whyalla, there's thousands and thousands of fully grown gum trees that my dad planted in the 70s and 80s.
What an amazing story.
A great legacy.
Yeah.
But before school, we used to drive around with buckets of water in the old Volvo that he had, and the water would be sloshing all over the place, and because there was no hoses or anything, where he had planted these trees, and so we had to water those seedlings. And now when I go to Whyalla, I just look around and go, wow, I never thought of it at the time. I just thought it was a bit annoying to go watering trees, but now I can see the impact.
Oh, that's a beautiful story. I love that. How did you end up in the world of the arts from there? So you're obviously, your dad's a doctor, environmental thinking, wants to create a beautiful country town in Whyalla. Where does the arts come? Where does that string come from in your family? Was it something that your mother or your family brought over with you?
Yeah, I think probably both my mum and my dad. Yeah. But my mum was very strong about always. Whyalla was a thriving town in those days. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a really young town, and it was booming. A lot of everyone had a job. Yeah. There was a lot of money, even though it was a very working class town, but there was a lot of money. Everyone was spending money. Everyone was earning money, and they'd built this amazing theatre there, and they had a lot of touring acts would be like Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Whyalla. The international touring acts, Whyalla was on the map,
Yeah, wow.
So you'd get like a French puppet, like Philippe Gentil would like come to Whyalla, and we'd go to that. And Billy Connolly would come on his tour, and he'd go to Whyalla. And then, of course, Cold Chisel, Sherbet, all the bands were there too. So we were at everything all my life. Where that was just, Mum was always taking us to every cultural thing, and always bring us down to Adelaide for the Fringe and the festival as well when we were young. And so I guess that was my mum's influence mainly, but my dad as well in lots of other cultural stuff, but my mum mainly in terms of theatre and performance and making sure that we got to go and see a lot of live shows.
Now, so you get into the in the documentary world, you study in that space, the film world. You've created a documentary on your father, haven't you? Is that correct?
Yeah.
That was called
Your Old Father, which is like a Scottish word for father. That's how my dad used to write a lot of letters. So I went to boarding school, and he'd write to us almost every day. Every couple of days we'd get a letter. It was almost like the diary of Dad's day. He was a fantastic writer and very funny. And so he would often sign his letters off Your Old Father. That was his way of signing off. So I filmed with my dad a lot over my studies, and I'd often use him as my character for things. So I had a lot of old footage of Dad, and then as he was getting near the end of his life, he was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, so we were given a few months with him to live. And so at the time I was living in England. I was running a film festival in England, and I came home to help Mum. And I sort of came home thinking, oh, he's 3 months to live. He'll probably be lying down in bed or something. But no, he was watering trees every day with buckets. And even when he was like frail and dying, he was still doing that. And so I just went back into that rhythm of like watering trees with him, even though it was 40 years later. It was really quite amazing experience. And so I started to film on just anything on my phone, just like I didn't have proper camera people with me or anything. And then one time I sort of got him to agree that we could bring a camera person in and do some interviews, but most of it was just me filmed running after him, with him, like sort of just fly on the wall camera.
That's amazing.
And then
did he ever get to see it?
No, so he would. I don't know. I think he would be, because he kept on thinking, "What are you filming that for? What are you doing?" He would have been probably horrified that so many people ended up seeing the film, and it's been at film festivals all over the world, and it won the Audience Award in the Adelaide Film Festival, and they had to keep putting more and more shows on because it was selling out. He would have just thought, "Why do people want to watch that?"
Yeah.
But he was a fantastic. He really was an amazing character, and he was funny, but he was just beautiful, and people loved being in his company in the cinema for an hour.
Yeah.
And his wisdom and his humour, and we talk. And obviously I'm filming him with his trees, and then I had a friend of mine who I studied at film school with, and he animated a lot of the early days, my childhood, when we didn't have footage. And so there's it's an environmental film, but it's also a film about looking after someone whose days are numbered. Like, I mean, I think that was partly why so many people connected with the film and loved it, because so many people have looked after their grandparents or parents when they're dying. And there's something there's a sort of quiet dignity about people who know their days are numbered. And my dad really had that. Like, he wasn't panicking about dying or anything, but he was sharing so much love and wisdom, and it was, you could really see that on the camera. And I think people related to that because they thought, oh, that was what was my grandma was like, or my auntie when I looked after her. And so, I film with him right till he dies, basically, and his funeral. And so it's a story of a man who trod very lightly on the planet. He was a very environmental person before the green movement or anything like that. Yeah. And he was quite obsessive about water, like recycling things to a point that it was a bit weird. So he trod lightly on the earth, and then, the end of the film he's going back into the earth. And so it was really a powerful time.
Beautiful story.
Yeah.
I'm a I journal. I write my own thoughts down. And you said your father wrote letters. What was the context of those letters?
They were just what he's been doing that day, but also just him commenting on anything around the world, sometimes political, sometimes just his like what's been going on at work. Yeah. But he was very funny. I mean, he was a Glaswegian, hilarious, but like he had that humour. And he used to write to me, my sister, and all the nurses. After he died, I met a lot of his nurses he worked with, and they said that he used to write enormous patient notes that were just amazing and sometimes really funny, and like the whole life story of the patient that he got, and then he wrote it down. They said, they used to always want to collect them as a book because they said they were so funny and so amazing.
It's very stoic, isn't it? Like he
wrote a lot. Yeah. And then he also wrote endless letters to politicians. Okay. So I found a lot of them because his secretary used to type the letters for him as a doctor. Yeah. And then he would dictate these letters to premiers, South Australian premiers in the 80s and stuff. And he would write to them saying that they should set up solar farms in Whyalla and wind farms and things. I mean, this is like in 1982.
That's right. That's amazing.
And he was like, Whyalla is a perfect place for a wind farm. And if you would, and he was always having a dig at, he thought premiers of South Australia only cared about Adelaide. So he used to say things like, if you ever came to Whyalla, you'd be the first premier to even notice that we exist. Or, always sort of having a dig. But, it was a prolific writer.
Yeah, I love it. You must be very proud.
Yeah, it was I loved the response. I couldn't believe the response when people saw the film, and then they were like, "Oh, we just loved, we felt like we got to know him, and what a great sort of person, what a great legacy that he left."
Yeah, I love it. So during that you mentioned that you were you were in England and you were running a conference
festival
over there. Film festival. Was that the Sheffield doc? So you're CEO of.
Yeah.
So tell us about that role and how you transitioned into that world.
So the Sheffield, British documentary is, Britain is the centre of documentary in the world, right?
Yeah, David Attenborough, is it?
It's David Attenborough, Louis Theroux, there's just everybody, Michael Palin. And so you just have the BBC and Channel 4, but BBC has been just an incredible generator of the best documentaries in the world.
Yeah.
And so it is the epicentre. And so there was a documentary festival in England, which was really like the gathering of the British documentary industry every year. And the chairman of that was Steve Hewlett, who was a big media mover and shaker. He was head of certain television channels over his time and worked at the BBC and other places. And he was the chair of Sheffield Doc Fest, and he came to the documentary festival that I was running in Australia. And on the final night at the party, he said, look, we really need a new director and CEO to come to Sheffield and shake it up into an international festival, because it's a gathering of the British docs, but we need the world there now, because now the world was changing. It was all about co-productions.
Yep.
It was all about working across countries and so on. And that was that was identified as my skill set, because I'd created this meat market, which was all about the international co-production world and so on. So I went over, I flew to England a few days later and met the board, and then they offered me the job, and I moved to England like within a few weeks, because I was born there, so I have a passport. And so there was no, I was just like, it was really fast,
just easy,
right?
Yeah.
And so I took up the role at Sheffield Doc Fest, and it was in a bit of a state. It was in a moribund kind of state. It was on the way down. It had really been flagging. It wasn't really thriving, and so it needed a massive turnaround and a real injection. And we did turn it around, and we turned it into one of the absolute best documentary festivals in the world. We were right up regarded with Sundance, Tribeca. We were, all the industry used to descend on Sheffield, which, is quite a feat to get the world to come to Sheffield. I mean, speaking of Whyalla and steel towns, it's a bit like without the beach. And so, it was but we had so much fun. And then we set up a roller disco as a little one of our fun, because most commissioning editors grew up in those days, that era when I was doing Sheffield. Most of those commissioning editors grew up in the 70s when it was all roller skating. And so we brought back fun discos and roller discos and things. And it was so funny seeing some of the most senior television executives in the world roller skating at a roller disco. It was, but no, we played hard at night, but we also worked hard in the day. So we created a marketplace, which we called the meat market again. So we took the meat market to Sheffield. It became enormous. It was funded by the EU, funded by the British Film Institute. I mean, all the big guns got behind it. We created a marketplace that generated tens of millions of pounds worth of deals every year. And so we had hundreds of commissioning editors from television, investors, distributors, everybody from the film world was there. And it was quite amazing, because Sheffield's, it's quite a small city centre, even though it sprawls out into the hills and so on, but in the city centre, and it was a true takeover. I mean, we just took over the town, and it's a really beautiful town, and it's something that people don't realise Sheffield's actually really beautiful. So when they get there, they're like, oh, this is a beautiful town. I thought it was going to be an old rundown steel town, but it's actually really beautiful. And so I ran that for 10 years, and it just was on an exponential E-curve growth every single year that I was there.
What did you do in regard? Like you said, you got all these investors in, all this interest in. You grew it, and turned it into what was an iconic event. What does that look like? What when you walk in through their door as day one of CEO? What did it look like? And then what was your vision? Like how do you turn something around with that much impact? And we're obviously seeing the same thing you're doing here with the Adelaide Fringe, but I'm really interested in just understanding your thought process into turning something like that around.
Well, when I arrived at Sheffield, and I asked the finance head of finance, so what's the state of our finances right now? And they said they had £20,000 in the bank, and that was it. And they'd lost almost all their sponsors, and they'd become a sort of like people weren't really intending to register this year because it just had been sort of died. It had fallen off the cliff and forgotten to reinvent itself to be relevant to the new industry And so I was like quite shocked because, well, I didn't realise it was quite that bad. But I thought, okay, well, my approach is mainly I always want to go into understand everybody's what are people's experience and what do they expect their experience to be. So whether they're the filmmakers that we need to come and register as delegates, or whether they're the decision makers, the investors, we want them to come and see that the market is worth attending. Yep. And so I literally went out and just met hundreds of people and listened to what they want and why don't they want to come anymore. What's the problems? What would make them come? What's the change they need to see? So just all that stuff about understanding stakeholder needs and expectations and what's not being met. What's the worst thing that is happening right now that I can change and I can fix? And so we just what opportunities do you want me to create? Describe to me an ideal world of what you want from a great documentary festival. And people want connection. They want to meet the people they need to meet. They don't want to meet all the people. Like if I'm buying science shows for PBS in America, I don't want to come and meet everyone pitching to me about art documentaries and things. So I need some sophisticated sort of matchmaking done and all that sort of stuff. So we made that happen. We created a very bespoke experience for all the different people in the different genres of documentary. But even though we were servicing all the different genres, but everyone felt like they were getting the really special experience.
Isn't that amazing, right? So we're a company that specialises in organisational change, and as you can imagine, within that is stakeholder engagement, communications, and it's the same thing across all industries, not just in the arts and film industry. It's people want connection. They want to understand, well, it's the what's in it for me. How is this going to impact me and my work and my community and our customer and all the above. So
it's every industry is the same thing. I mean, I'm currently studying at MIT. I'm doing a course in exactly around, business growth, innovation and things like that. So it's all about that again. And this is what I've been doing and have generated amazing exponential growth both in Sheffield and in Adelaide Fringe over the years. But now I'm really understanding even more about that deeper surveying, deeper engagement, understanding much more about the user journeys. I mean, I remember when I first came to both Sheffield and Adelaide, and I talk a lot to the staff about let's paint a persona of typical customers. Let's paint a typical artist customer, a typical venue, a typical ticket buyer, and I think it was a new model for a lot of the staff that hadn't really done that before in festivals.
Mm-hmm.
But now we just use those personas. We refer to those personas all the time.
Yeah.
What would Harry want us to do? Like Harry wants, and so our aim was always to make. Both in Sheffield and in Adelaide, I was always driving big digital transformation.
Yeah,
So
brilliant.
bringing in new digital platforms for how people bought tickets, how people engaged in the event and so on, and trying to draw a seamless user journey that didn't have like any speed humps, any roadblocks. Let's get rid of them. What's making people hesitate when they come on? Why aren't they buying a ticket? And so to make we can't do that unless we're getting the head of the personas, the typical customers, and then step in their shoes. Because when you're on the inside creating something, creating a festival program or whatever it is that your business is doing, if you don't say, right, I'm going to be the grumpy customer, you can assume that's the problem, that you make assumptions that people are just going to smoothly sail through this ticket buying purchase journey, and they don't. And if you don't listen to, I always say to my staff, like, well, if there's complaints, they're actually like, don't take them personally, like write them down, and that's a great problem for us to solve. For when we do our planning for next year, what's the most common thing that people are ringing up that's stopping them to buy the ticket?
Great. Brilliant. So I love that. I love the idea of really working towards what the people want, and I think there's a lot of organisations, businesses, leaders who really set out to create really amazing product, but actually don't deep dive enough into, like you said, the user experience. It's paramount to the success of any organisation, and so kudos for you for picking that up. What happened then? Did you see? I mean, you mentioned earlier it turned into this this amazing event. I'm interested to hear your growth as you become a CEO. Do you become more confident in yourself? Do you become more confident in your abilities? It was your first CEO gig. So how did you deal with all the emotions whilst just trying to connect with people, which is really what it felt like your main method was understand who I'm speaking to and just connect the right people to the right people. Isn't this just a beautiful way of life almost?
So I mean, it was just about, it was about listening to all the different stakeholder groups. And so, for example, filmmakers, they wanted to meet potential investors in their films. They wanted to meet potential collaborators, but they also wanted, it's quite a lonely, documentary making is a very solitary experience. And so they also wanted a real party. They want to get together and celebrate with their industry.
Absolutely.
And so I knew that it wasn't just about a business deal. It wasn't just about a business conference. It was about creating a true festival experience that people loved and had a great time at. But when they left, they had a potential deal in their pocket. They had met a new producer they were going to work with. And so when Sheffield started, really immediately from the first year, and I think the Brits, the Brits really like wild times, eccentric people, outspoken opinions, and so
Doesn't
my
everyone?
chair. Well, I think it's a bit more so in Britain actually. If you go to Britain, there can be go to festivals and stuff. There's always great eccentric elements to them, and there's just a real eccentricity around Britain anyway. But my chairman said to me, like, Heather, you don't have to hold back here. Like, you can just push the boat out and make this festival as wild as you want and as fun as you want. And that was like a freedom that he gave me, that he didn't just say, we want to we need to look after the corporates or anything like that. He said, let's take the corporates and make them, push the boundaries. And, so that was really a liberating thing. And I was so lucky to have Steve as a chair for 10 years in Sheffield, because I got to learn to grow and not come from a point of fear and come from a let's take lots of risks.
Yeah, and explore. Isn't that what
And
the arts?
It's okay to take lots of risks, and sometimes they don't work. But luckily ours seem to be working, and people just were blown away about what a great what a great experience they had.
Well, isn't that what the art industry is about? The arts industry is about the exploration. It's not living within the confined boundary.
Well, it is, but it's interesting how often you see, even in arts and festivals, that people almost do a sausage factory sort of repeat. And
stick within the lines. Is that
yeah, and it's like, well, this has always worked. I'm a real believer that what got us here isn't going to get us to the next bit. So what got us here is fantastic, and we're standing on the shoulders of giants and great things. But if we stay stationary, we're going to go down. So what's the there's that S curve theory with the business of you can be on the up growth, but if you're not innovating and creating your next S curve, you can drop down, and that you see that. Speaking from a festival point of view, you do see that. You see festivals that either have that great growth and then they drop down, or they just plateau and they just sort of do a bit of a rinse and repeat sort of style. Whereas I'm always saying, right, what are we going to do next? Sort of, we had a massive digital transition and transformation in Sheffield with a whole new digital platform. We did the same thing here. We're always looking at, like, for example, bringing in interactive as a genre, bringing in the intersection of art and technology and immersive shows. That was when I did that in Sheffield. People were like, what's that got to do with the film industry? This is like 2004. It was like, now you couldn't find a film festival that doesn't have interactive now. But that's 18 years later. But, it was very early days in terms of that interdisciplinary, bringing code. I used to bring coders and games designers in and put them in the program and things like that. And there were some traditional film people who were like, well, hang on, this is a film festival. I was like, no, this is about screen industry. And and then
so you're a visionary, really, in this space, from like being able to see for the future. There's no difference to your dad with the trees, right? Like you're being able to see.
Yeah, that's funny. But I don't think so. I think I was lucky in that because I'm curious and because I like meeting people. I was always really interested in meeting people that are on the forefront of things and early adopters. I met some really inspiring people in the beginning of the 90s who were doing some really great stuff around the internet. And I met them in Banff, and I also met some in Adelaide. And those people had a big influence on me. Like, I was like, wow, this is this slow dial-up thing that was – but we were like, we could make things. But, of course, we couldn't because the slow dial-up couldn't even do text. But we thought we can have like –
the idea of it.
But we could see the idea of it. And I worked with this fantastic guy in Canada who sadly passed away now, but Peter Wintonic. And together between Australia and Canada – we set up things in the 90s of we called them DigiDocs and DigiFest and all this. We were trying to create virtual film festival. We did, so we were trying to create things in the sort of intersection of technology and film. But before anything could really happen, but that influenced me forever. And when I first came to the Adelaide Fringe 8 years ago, I introduced a new genre called interactive. And, it's going so well. I mean, now we've got some of the most incredible shows of these artists who are like coders, working with dancers, working with big script. And they're making these immersive shows that I have no doubt are going to get picked up in the marketplace and go touring the world because they're so cutting edge and so fantastic. But it was driven by us setting, let's give them a home, let's give them a genre and see what happens within the mix of the Fringe.
It's opening the door, isn't it, really?
We're having I've got this fantastic group that come here from Britain, actually, the Electric Dreams people. And Electric Dreams Conference has been happening for a few years now in the Adelaide Fringe, and it's on February the 20th, so it's one day only, the conference, but they've got a lot of other shows as well. And there's like an amazing, the head of the Games Network in Scotland is the keynote speaker, and he's got some fantastic stuff to talk. He talks about how games are going to be ubiquitous in every industry in the not too distant future, where the games developers are going to be required in every field, because it is how we how we experience health or anything is they're going to require games developers.
Gamification of it,
and gamification is coming at us very quickly. And
you can introduce me. We'll get him on the podcast.
you should get him for sure. He'll be great. Brian Baglow, and he's the head of the Scottish Games Network, and he's just amazing, very inspiring speaker. But he talks about that in some ways, a bit like what we were saying before, user journeys. A lot of that user journey mapping has come from that industry. It's come from the gaming industry. It's come from the website, internet, sort of, Silicon Valley. That's where I guess I learnt a lot of that stuff was by working alongside a lot of techie people. And in the 90s when I was working at the Star Club, and then I happily, so coincidental and fantastically, met these early adopters of the internet who really changed my way of thinking. And so I had these three streams going. I was doing filmmaking, I was working at the Fringe, but I also was being influenced by these people in technology. And those three lanes are sort of, I'm still in those three lanes, but I'm in them in a different way now, and trying to bring more people in. I mean, I'm always about everybody's invited and everybody should be involved, and I'm not I'm not very interested in exclusivity at all. I'm not interested in VIP this or that and this much, like you're curated, you're in and you're out. So I'm very much about everybody's can be involved. Anyone who wants to put a show on, I love that about the Adelaide Fringe, has always been inclusive like that. Yeah. But to me, it's like that, bringing in the technology, bringing in the designers in that sort of games area and the web area, it doesn't seem odd to me at all. It just seems like, well, aren't we all going to innovate when we get together?
I'm a closet gamer. I do play a bit of a few games.
Oh, you'll love the Electric Dreams.
Yeah, so for me, that gaming world, I've actually been speaking to a few people about the gamification of business and how you can bring it into a consulting world. It's just something that's of interest to me. I'm mucking around with that concept in the background, but kudos to all your great work in the Doc Fest. It was named by the Variety magazine as the Premier League of the Doc Fest. So well done. You did extremely well there. I'm now interested in your journey towards the Adelaide Fringe and becoming the CEO. Being a South Australian boy through and through, grew up in the state. I've seen the growth and rise of the Adelaide Fringe, and it's actually something that, as a South Australian, I feel very proud of as a state, that we're putting on something that's so amazing. And as you were talking there, I couldn't quite put my finger on it over the past couple of years. And obviously COVID obviously ruined some things here and there and everywhere. But what you said in regards to what you did with the Doc Fest, how you made it this community thing, like you made it this, you engulf the state, or you engulf Sheffield, I should say. Yeah. I feel you're doing the same thing here, right? Where I feel engulfed. I feel like I'm getting swarmed. I'm getting picked up and taken on this ride, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So kudos. So can we start back at the start? 2015. You've joined the Fringe. And just so for everyone to understand, it's not just called the Adelaide Fringe Festival. The Fringe Festival is a type of festival. Can you just draw on your understanding of what is a Fringe Festival, and then what is it actually supposed to do, and then how we then grew it in your career at the Fringe? Yeah.
So, well, the Adelaide Fringe is an open access festival, which means that anybody can put on a show, and Edinburgh Fringe is also an open access festival where anyone can put on a show. There are hundreds of festivals in the world that call themselves a fringe, but they don't often embrace the open access. They still do curation, but there's still quite a few open access fringe festivals around. But the word fringe has morphed into just sort of almost meaning festival now, because hundreds of fringes are not actually open access.
Yeah.
But the reason it was called fringe in Edinburgh and Adelaide is that Adelaide and Edinburgh have had major international arts festivals. In Edinburgh's case, it was in the mid-40s that it started, and in Adelaide it was 1960. So major arts festival began, but it was a curated festival where they invite a ballet from Russia and an opera from Germany, and you know that, and then that was a very top-down, curated, invite-only style festival. And then local artists, this happened both in Edinburgh and Adelaide, very sort of mirror image experience. Local artists were like, well, how can we be involved in the festival? And they were like, well, this is a festival of international we're inviting international shows that you're not part of the program.
Yep.
And so the artists said, okay, well, we're going to start something on the fringe of the festival. So that's what we're going to start, the fringe. And so they, very brave artists in the 60s, putting on theatre shows in the Adelaide Uni, putting on visual art exhibitions, all sorts of things. And it has always been there. The fringe has always been there along the side of the festival. So the open access nature of it was how it was born, and we are very strong that that's how it will remain.
Right.
We don't have any targets to grow the number of shows or anything like that. We certainly have targets around selling more tickets, because that helps the artists in their box office. But so we've always said anyone can come along. You can put on a show. Anyone can put on a show. We'll help you find a venue. We'll put the show on our ticketing and we'll sell it for you, and then we'll give you that whatever money you get. It's a bit like Airbnb.
Yeah.
If you put your house on Airbnb and no one books it, you don't get any money.
Paid, yeah.
If people book it, you get paid. It's the same. So we have in the 60s, the fringe, really just these brave artists putting on shows here and there, whatever they can eke out. And then in the 70s, it really becomes a bit more formalised, and Don Dunstan was instrumental.
Former premier.
Former premier. And then in the late 70s, early 80s, it really cemented with getting a board, getting a chair, started to become really a significant size. And then around the 90s, we start to see a lot of cabaret and comedy, people that have gone on to be big names in Australian television and so on, but they really saw Adelaide Fringe as the launch pad for their career. They thought it's a great great city to come and test their new shows.
Test your content,
And so and in those days, Adelaide Fringe is in the early 90s selling around about 100,000 tickets per season. That's a lot of tickets, especially for the 90s. But some really successful arts festivals in Australia sell around about 50,000 tickets, right? So that's really healthy ticket sales. So if you think that the scale of Adelaide Fringe is something to behold, when even in the 90s we were selling 100,000 tickets, that's so impressive. And it meant that people just were coming out from everywhere, every demographic. The age range of the fringe audience has always been extremely wide. And so it's very, as you say, Adelaide people are very proud of it. They feel ownership of it. And I think when people from Adelaide go elsewhere and they go, oh, so where's your fringe festival? And they realise, no, not every city has something like this. There's only one or two cities in the world that have a festival that truly transforms the whole place. And so then as we're coming up through 2015, selling around about 500,000 tickets, and then that's when I took on the role of CEO.
Yep.
And I was, I brought a lot of my typical sort of approaches to let's look at what we can do. Let's understand what the artists want. What are the problems? What are the things we need to fix for them? What are the venues?
Digital piece as well.
Exactly. What's all the challenges for buying tickets? What's all the anything? What can we do in our S curve? What's our new innovation? What's our next S curve going to be? And so over the next few years, we brought in a whole new ticketing system, a whole new digital registration platform for the artists and so on. And the meat market model is like we call it the honeypot.
Yep.
But that is was absolutely instrumental as well. So now we have in our marketplace, in the honeypot marketplace, we attract about 300 programmers from all over the world, from Soho Theatre in London to the Lincoln Centre in New York to festivals in Germany, and Singapore, Malaysia, everyone. And they come here to find new talent and new shows to book for the future, for touring. So again, that means that the artists, not only are they doing it because they're going to try and make some box office and try some new shows on audience, but they're also hoping to get picked up for touring.
Yeah.
And we even have like America's Got Talent, Britain's Got Talent, Australia's Got Talent. They're sitting in the audience. You never know who's sitting next to you. Adelaide Fringe.
Wow.
Cruise ships are there finding shows, and then theatres are there. So theatres are there looking for some really unusual creative plays, and then the cruise ships are there looking for the most populous kind of wild cabaret drag shows. I mean, everyone's looking for something different, and that's the beauty, because Adelaide Fringe has got something different.
Beautiful.
And so in my first 4 or 5 years, we had 20%, so double-digit percentage growth on ticket sales every single year until we got after 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So on my 5th year, we sold 850,000 tickets, and I started at sort of 400 and something.
So you doubled the size.
And that's when COVID came, just right at the end of Fringe 2020. But bizarrely and thankfully, we were still able. We're one of the only festivals in the world that didn't miss an edition. Yeah. We didn't miss a year ever. And the restrictions opened and closed, and the borders opened, the lock, sort of the stay at home, the whether or not you could operate. But every time in 21 and 22, every time we were so lucky that restrictions opened enough that we could run the Fringe, and we sold 700,000 tickets in each of those years, which is unbelievable, even in the pandemic. And we could only sell every second seat, so everyone had to have a seat between them.
Yes, I remember. I went to a few shows. Yeah. It was actually quite nice because I'm a big guy, so sometimes I get squashed in. So just on that, like fingers crossed this year we cracked 1 million ticket sales, right?
I think so. I mean, we're on the way. Right now, we're tracking around about 10% ahead of where we were in 2020.
Yeah, so there we have it. So you're at 8,900, almost around 900. So if we can get over the $1 million mark, that'll be amazing. Well,
1 million tickets. So
1 million tickets, I should say.
We do about 24. We'll probably do $24 million at the box office, I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe 25 million. But that gets paid out to the artists, and that's a massive injection.
Huge. But it's the injections in South Australia. I read some statistics. It brings in 50 million of new money.
Tourism.
Yeah, of new money to the state.
$100 million of gross economic
to the state.
Injection.
It's absolutely brilliant. But is there a limit to the to put it in context, the Edinburgh is the biggest number one and sells $2.2 million tickets, I should say, per event. Is that within reach? Like, is that just can Adelaide accommodate for something like that? Yeah,
100%. So Edinburgh has about 3,000 events. Mm-hmm. And they sell around about 20% of their ticket inventory. So some sell 100%, some sell 5%, right?
Yep.
We have around about 1,000 events, and we've had around about 1,000 events for a long time, probably 10 or so years.
Yep.
Sometimes it's 1,100, 1,200. We don't have any targets of growth around the number of events in the festival. But what we have is a target of our growth in tickets. So we now sell 42% of the ticket inventory, which is actually a lot better than Edinburgh's about 20% of the ticket inventory they sell. So that's much better news for the artists here because more bums on seats, they're getting better box office back for them. And we know that we attract around about 30,000 tourists a year now. When I arrived, it was about 10,000. So we are aiming to get more like 60,000 tourists or 80,000 tourists. And if we can get up to that, and, the hotel, it's fantastic because all the new hotels have been built.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's definitely
Sky City, everyone rubbing
available.
their hands there, the Crown, all the above,
And so if we can get our tourism numbers up, because there's the Fringe happens over 31 days and nights. Most tourists coming for 4 days, 3 days, something like that. They're not all coming all at once, but they spread out over the month. And if we can get up to 60,000, 80,000 tourists will buy more tickets than someone like people who
because they want to do more when they're here, right?
Yeah, and they don't have to go to work 9 to 5. So there's more daytime jobs, more daytime shows. And so tourists are, might buy 6 or 7 tickets while they're here. Adelaide Fringe goers are buying about 3 to 4. So, we've got big growth potential because we're selling 42% of the ticket inventory at the moment. Yeah. And if we can get that up to about 60% of the ticket inventory, which is amazing. Yeah. Most festivals are selling, half of their inventory. It's not you don't just sell 100% of your inventory.
Yeah,
I mean, that'd be a dream, but you don't. If we can get more tourists up, and the thing is that we can guarantee that tourists are going to have an amazing time. Yeah. You cannot have a bad time at the Adelaide Fringe. It's just like there's beautiful weather that's out under the starry skies, lovely balmy nights. There's great theatre. There's great circus. There's cabaret. If you want something quiet and orchestral, there's that. If you want something really wild and late night drag show, there's that. Yeah. So there's something for absolutely everyone. And the town just comes alive. If you come to Adelaide any other time of year after you've been to Fringe, what's happened? Yeah. Where's it all gone? Yeah. So, because of all the Spiegel tents and all the tents and everything that pop up.
Just even the roads opening and, like you said, on a balmy night sitting out on Rundle Street having a wine, it's phenomenal.
It's amazing.
One thing we spoke about last time was there's a lot about the Fringe that's not public facing that people don't actually know about it. Can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek to behind the scenes? What does it look like? Is it the duck on water sort of thing? Nice and calm on the top, but the legs are sort of scrambling underneath. What does it look like behind the scenes?
Oh, absolutely. We're all ducks floating along, but really madly flapping underneath. Yeah. So the Fringe has 400 venues, and so there's all those venues that have, on any day during Fringe, there'll be north of 8, 9, 10,000 people employed in those venues, running the venues, like running the Garden of Unearthly Delights, running Gluttony, running the venues in the Victoria Square or High Marsh Square, and then all the bricks and mortar theatres and pubs, and so it's amazing what's going on and how many people it takes to make the Fringe happen. And then there's 6,000 artists, so around 25% are interstate, about 20% from overseas, and 55% from South Australia. So we've got probably, right now I think I think at the moment we've got about 1,000 visas done for the international artists that are coming in. Yeah. So, and that's just, it's just.
So you help them through that whole process.
We get them to do. They do it themselves, but we guide them and help them. Yeah. And so we know we know that there's north of 1,000 visas getting done just for the artists alone. And so this is the scale that I'm sort of like. It's just hard to even imagine. 6,000 artists descending on a town and turning it into such a festival playground. And so public facing, you see all the razzmatazz, you see all the fun and the glitter and the sequence and the arts. But behind the scenes, the artists are working so hard to sell their tickets. They've got to sell their tickets. No one's paying them to be on the stage. So they're doing the hustle. They're out on the streets giving out their flyers, and then they're also getting meetings with all these people that we've brought in for the marketplace. And we have people from 27 different countries coming in to discover new shows, to book them, and so that's what the artists are sort of. I think I was saying before about the show business. It's like there's the show, but there's also the business.
Yeah.
And so the artists learn a lot in the Fringe. They learn how to be a producer. They learn how to make the business side of their career work.
Yeah.
And so the ones who really nail that do very, very well. And it isn't just the most sort of commercial and populist shows that sell the best. There are actually a lot of really innovative and experimental and new work that sell well, but it's just down to whether or not they've really worked out how to help get those tickets sold. Things like, social media now plays a massive role.
Huge.
And so all the artists are learning how to do their own socials.
Yeah.
They're learning how to make the most of every, get word of mouth out to spread the word. And they're all hoping that, not all of them, because some artists in Fringe are doing a show for fun, but a lot of them are doing it because it's their career and their livelihood, and they're really hoping that the director from the festival in Singapore is talking to the festival director in Canada and Malaysia and France and whatever, and suddenly out of Adelaide Fringe, they've got an 18-month world tour. And that literally is a reality that happens. And often you'll see things in Sydney Opera House a year after being in Adelaide Fringe, and the ticket price is triple. And, so Adelaide Fringe tickets are very affordable. The average ticket price is around $34. And so you will see things first here. And then when you see them interstate and having a great run, and in Brisbane and Melbourne and over in London, our Fringe ambassador, Ruben Kay, from last year, he just won a major award last night in London, and he'll be coming back again this year. We watch the Adelaide Fringe artists absolutely thrive on the national and international scene after they've done their season.
Is there like a story? You talk about Ruben. Is there a story that sticks out with you that you go, I am so proud that I was involved in the growth of this act or person?
Oh, there's so many. So many great stories out of the marketplace as well. So a South Australian great success story is Gravity and Other Myths, who are a fantastic circus. They come out of the circus school Kids, and then they put on a show in the Adelaide Fringe and really nailed it in the marketplace. They got booked for years of touring to the point that they had to have a number of troupes. They had one troupe over in Europe, one troupe in America, one troupe in Australia touring, incredible deals. And then they got commissioned by a joint commission by the Edinburgh Festival and the Adelaide Festival, and they actually opened the Adelaide Festival last year to tens of thousands of people in the audience at the Adelaide Oval. And that is an incredible success story of a South Australian act that knew how to, really do well in the ticket sales in Adelaide Fringe, but behind the scenes, they also did really well in the marketplace. And another one is Michaela Berger, Amelia Ryan, Michael Griffiths. They're just fantastic cabaret stars from South Australia who have gone touring the world after Adelaide Fringe. And they've actually done that. A lot of their individual shows have been huge hits. And this year they've actually joined forces, the three of them, and they're putting on a show called Simply Brill, which is a wonderful show. And it was commissioned by the Adelaide Cabaret Festival earlier this year. They did their pilot run there, and now they're doing it in Fringe.
It's brilliant, and I think that's what's the most exciting. When I think about the Adelaide Fringe and what you're talking about here, I don't know, my mind goes to football, like an AFL camp, all the young talent of the world, in Australia go to one thing with all the scouts coming in to look at them. It's almost that appeal. And it's really exciting. Simply Brill, I'm going to go check them out this year.
Yeah, it's funny that the football, like the number of tickets that we sell is actually like, if you imagine both Adelaide football teams, Port Adelaide and the Crows, selling out every single game for the entire season at Adelaide Oval. That's how many tickets Adelaide Fringe is selling.
It's amazing.
There's not many arts festivals that can even, can get up at that sort of like massive stadium ticket selling thing. We sell during Fringe when as we're rolling out for the month. We sell between 20,000 and 30,000 tickets every single day. So just an amazing thing to think that there's all that engagement of such enormous numbers of audience, but also there's talent development. There's, launch pad happening for people. So there's a lot of comparisons that you could make between AFL and Adelaide Fringe.
Absolutely. So in regards to the comparison, talk about the ticket sales. What about what the Fringe is doing? I mean, I sometimes just go down Rundle Street and have a meal and just get involved in the whole event and don't even buy a ticket, right?
Yeah.
So it's not only that, it's what it's doing for the state, which is absolutely amazing. One thing that I'm really interested in, and I'm conscious of your time, so I want to sort of burn through this last bit. I've got so many questions I want to ask, but one thing that stood out for me, there was a quote that you've said is that, and I quote you on this, that the Fringe is so important to South Australians, and you could feel the magical atmosphere of the Fringe envelop us all. In our audience survey says that 93% of attendees told us that the Adelaide Fringe positively impacts their mental health. And so I'm really interested in that statistic alone. Because you talk about benefits to the state and benefits to human beings. This is having a remarkable impact. What made you want to survey about mental health? That was something that kind of first through. I mean, that's such a brilliant question to ask the public. How does this make you feel? But then secondly, how does that make you feel knowing that you're having such a positive, you and the team are having such a positive impact on so many human beings?
Yeah. I know. It's because we're always asked to measure economic impact, and we're always asked to measure these things because of return on investment that we have to report back to if we get a government grant or a council grant and they want that sort of thing. But we're really aware that there's other return on investments that are much harder to measure. And
qualitative.
Exactly. And so we were like, well, and this is a work in progress, and we've only just really touched the tip of the iceberg in terms of how we can measure. There's a lot of work going on, and I would say Britain probably leading the way in this area at the moment. But in terms of measuring what a positive impact art can have on people's mental health, and engaging in art, yes, like being in the arts and being part of a show, but not only that, but actually just attending and going along and experiencing art, to the point that now in Britain there are prescribing to go to a show is something doctors will do. That's how recognised it's becoming now in Britain, that the work that's been done, there's been so much research around the fact that art can have a more positive impact on our mental health than prescribing drugs, and we just haven't done very much work in that area.
There is a podcast that I listened to recently where there's an expert he's an expert in awe, 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 right? And he says that just being in awe, so even going for a walk outside and being in awe of your surroundings or the environment.
Is it who is it?
This was the Diary of the CEO podcast.
Oh, right,
I can't remember the name of the.
Oh, no, it's a different guy. But I was thinking it was anyway.
But I can't remember the guy who.
I thought it was Jason. Anyway.
It might, I can't remember 100% who it might be. It might be. We might be thinking about the same person, but on different podcasts, right? But he talks about the idea of being in awe, even if it's a couple of minutes a day, has a drastic improvement to your mental health. And so if you're thinking about the arts, you go and even just having a look at a painting, you could be in awe of this painting, or let alone a show where you're in awe of these acrobatics or this musician or whatever. I mean, naturally, it's going to have a positive effect.
Yeah, I think it might be Jason Silver that you're talking about. So Jason Silver, he talks like an incredibly inspiring. He's a really inspiring guy, isn't he? Yeah, I follow him on Instagram. He's amazing. And shots of awe. He talks about shots of awe and how you need them, for your well-being. And definitely, what we're doing is we're giving people shots of awe at the Adelaide Fringe. We are trying to measure. It is the first thing is about measuring. Do people feel it? Do people feel that they feel better and they feel happier and they feel that their mental health's improved by having Fringe happening and by them coming? But then I think the next step we have to look at is because the health budget is the biggest budget. That's the biggest money. Yeah. And everyone wants to find out how to save money in health. And my feeling is art can save money in health. And so engaging in art, getting the whole of the population more engaged in art can actually have a big impact on saving the health budget. Well, that's the line I'm going to be exploring, and I'm hoping to be able to go to the politicians and find some great researchers.
Well, there has to be some connection there, right? There has to be some parallel. If you're enjoying and you're enjoying a moment, you're enjoying an act, you're enjoying a song, and a smile hits across your face, and you're part of a community, you're in amongst people who are enjoying the same thing that you're enjoying, like there's got to be some positive benefit there, 100%. Right? It has to be.
And I think there's been a lot of recognition as well that sport does that too. And, the amount of money that goes to sport compared to the amount of money that goes to art is, you can't compare the two, right? Yeah. So, but I do think that engaging in art has that same impact that people are recognising that sport does as well. So there's a lot of work to be done around that, and finding ways to measure that is the challenge coming at us.
Brilliant. So I'm going to jump into you as a CEO now, and just to round off the Adelaide Fringe for everyone, it's starting in the next couple of days, isn't it now? So, go and buy your ticket. Let's get up to 1 million sales. That'd be amazing. I am interested in you as Heather as a CEO, right? You've been nominated. You've won some awards, I should say, not nominated, but the CEO of the Year from multiple magazines. Kudos there. What does that mean for you? What does CEO of the Year look like? I think you obviously, from what we can hear, you're doing wonderful things: inclusion, diversity, innovation. All that is. You've built this beautiful concoction of what it is to be a great leader. What does it mean to you to be CEO of the Year, and what do you think you're getting recognised for?
Well, I also have an amazing team, right? So
no doubt.
I have an incredible team at the Fringe, and also I'm because I've been very open about the fact that I always want us to be continuously improving and ever learning, agile, responsive to what people are telling us. I never want to just be
stale,
repeat, and so the sorts of staff that have ended up coming to work with me at the Fringe are those people. They're the people who also really love being agile and adaptive.
That's a testament to you, right? So one of the main roles of a CEO is to attract the right people, get the right people on the bus, yeah? And so you've been able to do that by setting that vision, and then obviously going after it and setting the values around it as well.
Yeah, and we it took a few years to get that right, and I know they always talk about the storming, norming, and performing. And we did a bit of that. But we are a team that is very committed now to this whole. It's not. We don't just talk. We walk it. We walk it. We do listen to how can we improve. We in the last year, we've launched our reconciliation action plan. We've launched our disability and inclusion action plan. We've launched our sustainability action plan, and these things are deep within the organisation, and they're not done by consultants. We actually do them in-house through lots of consultation. We have a lot of the staff are just deeply connected to all this stuff, and communication in the organisation is something we've worked really hard on, cross-departmental communication, vertical, horizontal. It's all those things that you have to make sure that I always say I don't want anyone to say I never knew about that, or I was the last to hear about that, or I want everyone to know everything really. I try to make myself, I'm a very open door CEO, so I try to make myself available to anyone in the org at any time without anyone feeling undermined if someone comes direct to me. Right. But I do make it, even because we have 40 year round and then hundreds in the shorter term. But I do make time in my diary for about a half an hour one-on-one with absolutely every single person in the org. Once a year, that is separate to nothing to do with performance reviews or anything like that. It's just like, this is your time to just tell me whatever. And so even though that doesn't sound like a lot, I have a lot of communication with them all the time.
No doubt.
But I'm talking about just like, I just want to make sure
you're present for them.
And that everyone knows they can come anytime. But just if they never do come through, I just want them to know they can come in at that time and tell me anything.
Well, I mean, this is what your job is, to go out in the world, bring in great people to help you run this business. Your job is to go out of the world and bring in great acts and great performers and great industry to come in. So it's about building this groundswell of amazing human beings, which seems like what you're doing.
And also because it's a lot of outward. As a CEO, you're looking out a lot,
100%,
right? So, I mean, that's where my executive director level staff are important at looking in as well. So I can't be looking in as much as everyone might be, because I'm also looking out and doing a lot of stakeholder engagement onto the outside. And then we do things like every year since the day I arrived, and I did this in Sheffield as well, but we go away for planning days. We don't just do them at the office. We go away to somewhere, I really believe, get out in the green, go to the country. We book hotel, stay in a motel, take over some little village somewhere, little country town, or somewhere up in the hills or whatever, and we do that's when we talk about our personas and our user journeys and what about things that we want to improve, and that we do a lot of work that I don't think you can do it as well if you stay in the office, so we do that at least once a year, and a lot of opportunity I like to make sure that there's a lot of opportunity for staff to develop within the organisation.
Yeah, great.
So we've had now, I've done 8 fringes. There's quite a few people that have done all of them with me in the organisation, probably 8 or so. Yeah. And then there's probably another 8 or 10 who have done 6 or 7. Some have done 5, and there's always a few that have just, been only 1 or 2 years. Yep. But now we're getting, we've got people that are really in that stride of knowing that we're always listening. We're if you want an opportunity to move to a different department or to move up, and we have internships, and a lot of the staff that work at the Fringe in my time started as an intern. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to step in new opportunities in the organisation, or new positions, or step upwards or sideways. Yeah. So always trying to make sure there's a lot of professional development, learnings. I mean, I try to learn more and more as well. Like I did the year-long governors leadership course, which I really enjoyed and learnt a lot at. That was a great...
Is it demanding of your time, putting that time and effort in? Do you believe that that's something all leaders should do, put time and effort into their own growth?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the governor's leadership was demand. I mean, I'm doing this course at MIT at the moment. Same. I have to be on I'm on Zooms till 3 a.m. Yeah, well, because I'm on Boston time for it. But it is important, I think, because you just learn so many. You do learn new methodologies or new ways of thinking. I always try and bring things. I'm a very practical person, so I always try and bring what I'm learning in the course almost immediately back to I say, what about this? And sharing it all with them. And one of our exec directors is doing the GLF at the Leaders Institute this year, but it's compulsory attendance. You're not allowed to miss anything. And I mean, it's very much give up your weekends, all that sort of stuff. But once you make connections with people that I'm still friends with all my cohorts from 100%. The GLF, and I like to make sure that I keep my brain agile and thinking.
I love it.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really conscious of your time because you have to shoot off in the next 10 minutes or so. I just want to ask one last question before we jump into what is our quick fire questions at the end of the podcast. Have a bit of fun just towards the end. I'm really interested in the next steps. Let's look beyond the Fringe, right? Beyond the Fringe Festival for Heather. What does that look like? Where does the world take you outside of the Fringe Festival?
Well, I mean, I don't really know. I'm at Fringe for a little bit longer. But
you're contracted and all the above. I get that, but
I think I'd love to step into some sort of cultural leader role that is about the broader creative industries. I think there's some real work that can be done in bringing together different parts of the creative industries. Yeah. There's some interdisciplinary connections that could take us on real step change and growth. Bringing at the moment we're a bit siloed with the visual arts and the games are over here and the films and so on. I think creative industries as a whole is something that we can really bring together a bit more and understand it and respect it as a job creation industry. Like there's opportunity there. So I'd love to step into something like that, I think, in some sort of leadership role around boosting the creative industries opportunities across Australia.
Amazing.
And help more people realise their dreams in the creative industries.
And I think everyone will be calling you out for in that role eventually. So because you have the ability to make an impact, which is fantastic. So we're going to jump into some quick fire questions as we round off the podcast. I had 1,000 other questions to ask you, so I'm a bit bummed that it's gone. We've
Sorry.
No, that's fine. You're a busy human being. I'm lucky enough.
Got a few days.
No, that's right. I'm lucky enough to look. We've got this podcast happening right before the Fringe Festival, so I can imagine your time is limited. So I appreciate the hour and a half with you. As we jump into, are you a big reader? Do you read much? Do you get in?
Yes,
do you read books? What are you reading?
Books.
What are you reading right now?
Oh, right now. I mean, right now I'm reading the Fringe Guide. That's probably what I'm reading.
Back to front, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I'm reading a book by Fenton Bailey, who is the producer of RuPaul and also the producer of many, many great documentaries and other things. And it's called Screen Age, and it's his stories of producing amazing. And he's a he was at the forefront of reality television. He's at the forefront of those early shows that used to give people cameras and they could make diaries and film themselves and film their lives, which was obviously now it's different because everyone's got a phone, but back in those days. Yeah. And actually Fenton Bailey, he's actually coming to Adelaide Fringe to launch his book. And so I'm reading that right now.
Well done.
Yeah.
Very good. Is there any book that stands out from the crowd for you? One that you might have gifted more than any other?
I've probably given Miguel Street by V.S. Nepal to people a lot.
Yeah.
It's a book that I just love the dialogue in that book. It's very funny. It's like it's on Who Lives on Miguel Street and just a day in the life kind of vibe of a book. Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. What's one lesson that's taking you the longest to learn?
Well, probably that Well, I think, we are all the script writer of our own life. And sometimes I would get stuck. If you're an outspoken person like me and always shaking things up, and sometimes, you can get a lot of judgment from people on the sidelines, sometimes negative judgment. And I would sometimes listen to it too much. And now I just think, nah, they're not the script writer of my life. I'm the script writer of my life.
I mean,
so try not to let those negatives,
Yeah. Well, there's always going to be someone that doesn't like the movie or the screenplay or whatever it is, right? So,
and the more you move up as a woman CEO, the more people have a go. So So I just think, well, I'm the script writer of my life, and whatever I do is what I can be sure that
100%.
I don't need to worry.
Well,
about
again,
that.
why live within the confines of what?
That's right.
Yeah, I love
and
it.
and I think a lot of the innovation that I've pushed for has sometimes rattled people or ruffled feathers or whatever, but in the end it's been amazing to have gone on the journey and then come out and think, wow, that was so exciting to collaborate with people that wanted to sort of jump off.
Well, I
the
think
cliff.
the great thing from what I'm hearing about you is that you do this because you want the better of the Fringe Festival. You want the better of the organisation, the community. So it always comes from a good space. So kudos. If you could have 3 people to invite for dinner, who would they be?
Oh dear. Okay. Well, this year at the Fringe, it would be Penny Arcade, Queen Kong.
Queen Kong, yeah.
Yes. And, well, Sarah Millican as well, the great comedian. I mean, I'd love to invite loads of people to a dinner party, but I think this year they would be the ones.
They would be the ones. I love how you turn that into a Fringe.
I know, because my mind is is so stuck on the Fringe.
No,
right
it's
now.
brilliant because it actually, anyone listening, they go, actually, I'm going to go check these guys out, which is fantastic. More ticket sales. See, I know what you're up to. What's some of the best advice that you've ever received?
Probably just breathe, take a minute, pause. And what was one of the trainers in the leadership course at the GLF called it the PRO.
Okay.
Pause, reflect, and open from the heart.
Yeah, great.
So if something happens that you really just want to jump, have a reaction to, just breathe and pause, reflect, and open from the heart.
Yeah.
So I do love that because
that is great.
Sometimes when you just want to go, why did someone do? I was going, pause, reflect, and open from the
well, you're not answering from an emotional state. You're answering from a bit more of a logical state. That's brilliant. If you had access to a time machine, where would you go?
Oh, dear. I don't really know. I mean, I think my immediate thought is I want to go to see a gig of one of my favourite performers or something, which isn't really. I know that a time machine can go back to the pyramids or something.
Forward,
you know,
right. Or
most times in human history will be quite smelly, I think, because there's a very small time that we've all got showers.
Oh,
and so on.
Yeah, I know. I've always wondered that. I watch movies sometimes. I go, they haven't had a shower for 2 weeks. I wonder how they sort of. But they just.
Yeah. I just. I mean, I don't. I'd love to go. I'd love to go back to, even just like seeing the life of my parents, like when they grew up in Glasgow, and just they were on this. There's just all the trams running around and, a real fantastic time, I think. So I wouldn't mind going back to see what my parents' childhood was like.
Just bring some good soap
50s
with it.
in the Glasgow. But it'd be probably quite a hard time. There'd be a lot of... It would be quite harsh, but wouldn't it be great to sort of get a little bit of a sense of what your parents or your grandparents' life was like?
It's one of my favourite answers on this show. Is almost you've nailed it there. Someone said to us one time that he would go back and visit his grandfather when he was 18, Just to see how he reacted and acted and
yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking too. Like
fun.
I quite like to go back and see. And when you see old archival footage of, the 40s or something, or photograph albums, and you just think, oh, wouldn't I just want to get in there, just go in there and see what it's like.
Oh, I'm with you 100%. If your house was on fire and all your pets and family, everyone was safe, is there anything that you'd go back and grab? Everything's online these days, so it makes it a bit hard, that question.
I think I'd go back for art. I've bought paintings on that I just adore on my walls with my partner and I, just to the point that there's no room left on the walls. Yeah. So I think, we go back for the paintings. Yeah. We've got an amazing painting by Gavin Wanganeen. Love to go for that.
Gav's been on the show. I love his paintings. Yeah.
Oh, and also Zachariah Fielding, who is in Electric Fields, is an incredible painter from the APY lands. And I'd love to make sure I got my Zachariah painting. And a few others. And my son is an amazing artist as well. So I'd grab as many paintings from the wall.
Right, last one. If you had one superhero power, what would it be?
Oh, superhero power. To make sure that there's enough funding for all artists that want to perform, make sure there's enough money for the arts to thrive, and, we could all conspire to make our life a bit better if we can all get involved in more art. So I think, my superpower would be to try and make the lot of artists a lot better.
Excellent. I love it. Look, thank you so much for your time. It's been an amazing chat with you, and to be honest, to hear your journey all the way from the UK through to Australia and all the things that you've done here. I want to thank you on behalf of everyone for the amazing work that you and the team are putting together down there at the Fringe. It's a remarkable event. It's putting South Australia and particularly Adelaide on the map. Keep up the good work and keep striving. I want to see us take on the number one and become that in the future years. Is there any way people can get in contact with you through LinkedIn? Is that the best way that people could connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not great on the messages. Yeah. Every now and again I go, no. There's 50 messages that I haven't seen. But no, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way.
Just to follow you. Perfect. Yeah, don't bombard with messages, but just to follow.
Only because I'm just not very
we get bombarded anyway, right? You have a C in front of your title and all of a sudden your inbox fills up very quickly. But thank you again to you and the team. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Looking forward to watching what the future holds for you on the Adelaide Fringe.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Thanks for listening to the podcast all. You can check out the show notes if there was anything of interest to you and find out more about us at SynergyIQ.com.au. I am going to ask, though, if you did like the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me if you could subscribe, rate and review. And if you didn't like it, that's all right too. There's no need to do anything. Take care, guys. All the best.